I have a lot of books at home, so I wanted to read them all. And this video is a video of some kind where I go over one book that I've recently read. This is An Anthropologist on Mars by Oliver Sacks. I purchased this book for only $4 at the Strand. It's a bookstore here in New York City, and I actually love this book. The author was recommended to me by a friend way back in high school. It was written by Oliver Sacks. He's a neurologist who worked mainly here in New York, but also all over the country, visiting people with interesting neurological problems. I wouldn't even like to call them problems, just different ways of thinking. And I finished reading this week, and it's one of the books in my collection. Hopefully I could do this video series with all the books and stories in my collection, but it's one of the books in my collection I want to read first in this rereading of many of the things I own. And so I just wanted to give a quick summary of what this was about. Basically, it goes over 7 different tales, 7 different people. Chapter 1 is the case of the colorblind painter. It's about a guy who was in a car accident and then afterwards lost his ability to not only see color, but his concept of what colors were. The next one was The Last Hippie. It's about a person who is unable to form new memories, and so the last memories he did form were in the 60s, and so he still thinks people like the Grateful Dead are still a thing. He doesn't know that some of the members have died, things like that. The next one is A Surgeon's Life. It's about a surgeon who has Tourette's, but not only the Tourette's where you just have a verbal tic, but like he lunges and does like strange things, or he'll like tap, and he can't control it, but he's a surgeon, and it seems like when he's concentrating, he does have some form of control over his Tourette's. To See and Not to See was the next chapter, and that chapter was about a guy who had been born with like this problem in his eye, but then early in his life he can kind of see, but then he lost his ability to see, and apparently there was like a cataract or something in his eye, and when they removed the things in his eye that prevented him from visualizing the world, his brain hadn't properly made the connections to determine what the visual impulses were. Like, where does the dog stop and the background begin, or things like, what is a tree? And he had problems putting his visual world and mixing it in with the world of the blind, where other senses like hearing and touch were more important. In the blind world, things sort of come into your existence when you hear, when you feel them, and then go more away from the existence when they're not close to you. And so he had problems mixing his spatial world of the visual with the temporal world of the blind. That one was a bit trippy. The Landscape of His Dreams was about a guy who in his early life lived in Pontito, but now lives in California somewhere. I believe it was LA. And it's sort of like a tick in his brain where he keeps just remembering Pontito from his childhood, and he has like this impulse to paint it, and he's painting Pontito and all the memories he has, but these paintings are uncanny because they're like real places that he hadn't been to in 30 or 40 years. Prodigies was about people who have interesting abilities but are what they would call idiot savants. There are people with autism who have very interesting abilities. This book focuses on one such person who has ability to draw things. He really likes to draw buildings, and he can remember buildings that he saw years ago, and he'll draw them. And the last chapter is An Anthropologist on Mars, which talks about Temple Grandin, who is a animal scientist with autism and also an engineer. She kind of has her own business, and what she does is first of all, she's very active in the animal science scene, trying to come up with more humane ways to treat animals, mainly the animals that we use for food, cows and pigs and things like that. And it just goes into how she thinks, how she developed her worldview, the hugging machine that she keeps by her bed. And so with that, that's what Oliver Sacks, an anthropologist on Mars, is about. It's basically case studies of these people who, for all intent and purposes, we wouldn't call them normal, but they do live somewhat normal lives. Some of them, not the one that's stuck in the 60s, but they're out there, these people, and they're spectacular because the way they perceive the world is so vastly different than the way most people would perceive the world. And so that's what this book is about. Oliver Sacks actually died in 2015, but I do have many of his books, and I'm just going right into the next book on my list to read, and that one is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. It's another set of case studies. If you liked Anthropologists on Mars, please leave a comment down below. I'm trying to keep this video short and sweet, below 10 minutes, so please leave a comment down below. We can have a discussion, or tweet me. This is Oliver Sacks when he was alive. Tweet me on Twitter, jmahia1187, and we could talk about this book, or we could talk about this book, the next book I'm reading, which is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, also by Oliver Sacks. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys join me on this journey. The idea for this series, just to go back to the intro, is what would happen to me if I read all the books in my collection? How would I change? How would that change the way I speak? How would that change the way I think? Just to incorporate all these ideas. Some of the books, like this one, I've already read twice before, but that was years ago, and now I'm rereading it again. And some of the books I've had in my collection, I just haven't had the opportunity to pick up and fully appreciate. And so I'm trying to do that, to not let them go to waste, to read the books in my collection. And so this was the first one I chose. That's what's going on here. See you guys.